Welcome to Legal Meets, a look at legal beyond the law. A podcast by LegalMeets. On this episode of Legal Meets, we meet Dennis Kennedy, Vice President Senior Counsel at MasterCard and highly regarded author, blogger, speaker, and co-host of leading legal technology podcast, The Kennedy Mile Report. As an early adopter of technology, Dennis was one of the first lawyers with a website and also one of the first legal bloggers. Hi folks, and welcome to this episode of Legal Meets. I'm joined by Dennis Kennedy over in Missouri. How are you going, Dennis?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me to this show. I really like the series of episodes you're doing.
Thanks so much. I've actually been a long-time fan. The other week we had Sam Glover from Lawyers, which was the first website that I immersed myself in to get familiar with legal tech, and the Kennedy Mile Report was the very first podcast. So it's a little bit surreal, somewhat starstruck, I'll say. And it's great to have you on, so thanks for joining us. You're a very, very busy man, speaking, podcasting, blogging. You're at the events, ABA Tech Show, and a lot of other conferences. Most of that revolves around the legal tech world, but we just want to give our viewers a sense of the Dennis behind the scenes and away from the legal world. If TED Talks got in touch with you, and we kind of often start the podcast with this question just to get a view of people's lives behind the legal tech world, what would you actually talk about? Is there any hidden talents, any particular passions? What would be the theme?
Well, you kind of tipped me to this question, so I had a little bit of time to think about it, and I thought that I spend a lot of time these days thinking about what it means to be an artist, and because I've had a couple of people say, "You're a writer. How did you decide you're a writer? Can I call myself a writer?" And so I said, "Yeah, I am a writer, but I think of myself as an artist." So that's sort of, I said, that's kind of tempting, but there are actual artists who can do that better than I can. And I get a lot of questions these days about mentoring people, how to mentor people, that sort of thing. It's a huge interest of mine, and that's another possibility. But I came down to this, which may surprise you. So people who see me on social media know I ride my bike a lot, and because I post the miles that I do. And for the last year, I've been working with a personal trainer doing kettlebell training. And so I think that I learned a lot over the last year or so, especially about gaining strength as you get older and how to stay fit and those sorts of things, and then how that affects you both physically and mentally. And it's given me a new sense of who I am, and I'm a lot stronger than I've ever been, and I'm riding a lot of miles, and I think that as a TED Talk, I could work up something really, really interesting on that.
So you're just hitting your stride, huh? You're just entering your youth now. It's a Benjamin Button mode. You're actually turning back the clock, getting fit, and but it's very interesting how it's whether it's health issues, just stress. You need to kind of hit all sides at once. So if you kind of exercise, you clear in the head, you make better decisions. You probably feel better, so you eat better, and then you're eating better, you got more energy. So it's this kind of virtuous cycle that you just need to get moving, right? You just need to get in the right sphere and get momentum. So maybe you could help a lot of lives with that talk.
Well, and there's a sort of, I've been thinking about walking meditation because of a book I read recently. And then there are times when I just take a bike ride. Sometimes I listen to podcasts, and I'm on a trail. I'm very safe about this, very open headphones, and I'm listening to podcasts so I can hear all the ambient noise. But there are times where I don't listen to anything, and a long ride really is a meditation of sorts for me. I often come back with ideas for articles and work things out in my head on a long ride. So that's another aspect of it as well.
Yeah, there's definitely, I guess, active meditation and the more passive kind. They say to get to know yourself, you just basically sit back and observe. So if you just want to get to know yourself, you go quieten down that monkey chatter and get to know yourself. So it's good to see that you're on the bike doing that and coming up with ideas for the podcast as well. So it's kind of meditation and working at the same time.
Wasn't it that Australian notion of the walkabout where you go out and you walk,
Yeah,
like
but
for this,
that's
walk so far that you come back and meet
well,
yourself?
there's a little secret that
Yeah.
we don't give away. It's only to walk to the pub. So it's actually that's a the original walkabout was it was probably a bad time of day, and the first pub was closed, so it ended up from going really outback. But you've got I guess the athletic side I just spoke about now, but you've also obviously a stern academic, and I caught wind that you were. I think Mark Zuckerberg maybe issued the initial challenge. I'm not sure if that's where you picked it up, but basically you planned in 2016 to read 52 books, and I believe you got to about 59, and not including all the other things you read, probably the back of packaging, just all that kind of stuff. But I'm sure there was obviously other work-related stuff that like copious amounts of volumes of reading. So you're doing it again this year. Was it difficult? Was it a hard thing to kind of stay disciplined, and do you have to put time aside every day to kind of jump into it?
Well, I used to have this notion when I was much younger, coming out of college and stuff, that the goal would be to read like 100 books, and so I've always read a lot. I mean, as an English major in college, but so I've always done a ton of reading. But I would say like 5, 6 years ago, I saw that there was like a mini blogging movement where people did 52 books in 52 weeks, with the idea that we just needed to read more books. And I said,
Right.
oh, I like that as a challenge. And so I've been doing it for quite a few years, and it's a book a week. Or this year I'm actually well ahead of schedule, but
Wow. Okay.
but it gives you the chance to do some reading and a little target and a little something that you check in with and to see how you're doing. But I'd found over the years that it was actually reading books was a form of de-stressing for me. So, so the books that I write down are the I would call recreational in a certain sense, but they kind of follow the things I'm interested in. And if anything, as my wife would tell me, I have an eclectic mix. So it could be some new areas that I want to learn, could be new authors I want to try. I usually try to find an author, usually a mystery or detective author, that I try to read the whole set of works during a year, you know. So that's been
So you've
fun
done
to
you've
do
done all the
that.
Dean Koontz and all those classic ones. So you've done the whole. I imagine you've done the whole series. So do you actually line up the next? Are you kind of got the next book waiting? Are you kind of planning some? Are you just making a short list as you go? And okay, that's a good one to catch up on. Or do you just have the next book and then you just find the next book? How do you go about it?
Well, I've sort of had this mini goal for many years to do something like that, where I would just say, I'll just line up the list and go ahead and read them in order. But what I do is I see, I go to the library. I'm now doing more ebooks with Kindle and Scribed, and my local library has ebook lending. So it's sort of like whatever grabs my attention at the time. So even if I had a list, I would be off it really fast because I'd find something that looked really good.
And so, are you actually a speed reader in a sense? Are you passing through like data like Ross or one of these platforms? Are you?
No, I don't consider myself a speed reader, but I know I read really fast, and I always have since I've been young. And in a way, I always thought that was one of my superpowers as a lawyer. The other one is the ability to read upside down
Well,
uh, and across the desk from somebody. I always thought that was a great one until my eyes started to go, and now people can tell that I'm doing that because you got to be looking right at it. Uh, but I could read so fast, and I always have done, and so the whole billable hour thing always seemed like it worked against me because somebody might take a whole day to read a
you're going
brief
too
that
fast.
I read.
Yeah, said no lawyer ever. And so, actually, how did you make that leap? How did you actually go from being an English major and obviously studying law at the same time? But where did the initial kind of flame, the initial passion for legal come from?
So I have this, as you see through my career, I kind of go into new areas that interest me. And the thing that's always surprisingly, I tend to do them well. So I always like to do things that interest me. So I started in college as a math major, and I was like halfway through my junior year, and got interested because of a professor and because, in a way, because the whole punk rock scene was happening at the time. Especially the UK punk music scene, so the Clash and all of that. And I had friends who were English majors, and one professor who said you should do this. And I said, what does this math stuff I'm doing? How does that relate to life? And so I made that switch, and then I said, okay, I got to do something after college. And people had always told me for years, like, you would be a great lawyer, and in a way they were right, but not for the reasons they thought. So people go like, oh, you can read, you can think, you can speak really well, you understand these things. I could see you trying a case. And that's not exactly the skills that I use on a regular basis. So in a way, they were right about what did it, but that I would do well as a lawyer, but not for the reasons they thought.
Right,
And
okay, not the
then,
obvious ones.
yeah, then it became a case of going to law school. So I applied to some graduate schools in English. The job market was horrific then. I think it's even worse now, but really bad then. And then I applied to Georgetown Law School because of a friend of mine at the time pushed me to do that. And they accepted me. And I talked to my mom, and my mom said, well, if you go to law school first, you can go to graduate school later.
Later, yeah,
Like,
okay.
so I went to Washington and to DC and to Georgetown, which is, to me, to be in that environment is probably like the coolest place to go to law school. I mean, you can walk over to the Supreme Court, the Congress is right there, all of that,
Yeah,
lots
I
of
never
great
thought of that. It must be
jobs.
a really great backdrop, right? So it's quite inspiring.
Yeah, and so that was great, and I was able to take one of the first computers in the law seminars ever offered in the U.S.,
Wow.
and that was my favorite class there, and
Yeah.
we debated some of the same issues that people still talk about these days about whether AI can replace juries and stuff like that. We were talking about in 1982, so
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
that's right.
so those big issues don't change, but what was like fantasy at the time is now reality right now.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about this a bit later in the podcast. But you mentioned that AI is not so much a new topic, and you were kind of basically doing one of the first you can say courses, I guess, on this many years ago. I don't want to date you, but you just mentioned the first computer, so that's all right. We'll leave it at that. But these days you're a senior counsel at MasterCard. Tell us a little bit about your role there, and and how is, I guess, the impact of technology kind of shifting and shaping the payments industry right now.
So over the course of time, I became kind of what I wanted to do in law school. I became a computer lawyer or an information technology lawyer. And so at MasterCard for 8 years, I supported our operations and technology group. And then the last 2 years, I moved over to what we call digital payments and labs. So that's digital wallet, mobile wallet, APIs, uh, innovation, R&D. So everything that's a new technology in payments is what I'm involved with now. So it's a great fit for me. And then I'm going to move more to the lab side of things in the coming year. And then one of the things I'll be responsible for is some of the financial inclusion things that we're doing. So we have a lab in Africa that's doing some really cool things with mobile apps and helping farmers make markets and if I have some bananas, as a seller, I'm able to match with a buyer and, transfer payment over a phone, not even a smartphone.
Yeah, we take
You
some of that
know,
stuff for granted, right? Like I think M-Pesa is one of the big, I guess, formats of currency exchange in Africa, and if the notion for someone in Australia or the US to actually transfer money that way through an analog almost kind of phone, it's kind of quite bizarre, right?
Yeah, and then I remember back tech show maybe like 10 years ago, there was a group of lawyers from Nigeria who saved up money and came over, and because they wanted to learn technology because they thought it was really important. And we were trying to figure out like how that infrastructure would develop. Like how do you put all that cable out there? And they were talking about like, well, it's going to be mobile, like we're going to skip the cable because it's impossible. It's too expensive. Like the distances, the infrastructure won't work. And M-Pesa is an example of how, at the sort of the edge of technology, people did some really creative, cool things. And so I think that in the financial inclusion area, what we talk about the unbanked, but a lot of female entrepreneurs in different parts of the world, they're really at the edge and trying new things that we can kind of pull back into more normal payments and commerce, because we don't need to do all these tricky mobile things, say in the U.S., because there's all this cable everywhere, right?
Right.
So we may fall behind a little bit in mobile because there's no push.
We've got it too good. I guess necessity is the mother of all invention. And there's actually
oh yeah,
I saw at one of the TechCrunch presentations. There was a company that come out again, like you got half the world's population living outside of rule of law and access to justice, and also access just to the internet. So obviously the Zuckerbergs of the world are doing a strong push to try and capture that audience with shooting off balloons and whatever else. But I saw a company that come out with a mobile phone that could actually send, again, analog signals to actually get translated into like basically a web protocol to actually display on these really old phones through really old networks, display possibly like Facebook and any other kind of website. So again, that would never happen in the US or these kind of first world countries. But it's quite interesting to see out of what's born out of necessity. So and that would reach a huge audience, right? So I'm sure these companies will try to work out how to get on there.
Yeah, I mean, our necessity is like, do we get it? How soon is it before? Is it 2 years up before we get the new phone?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like you're using a 10, 20-year-old technology and trying to make it do things it was never intended for.
Yeah, I think everyone just splashed their cash on the iPhone 7 and the iPhone 8 is probably already getting leaked, so they're probably cringing. But so you're obviously in a large corporation, and you've got a podcast where you're talking about new technology and and innovation. Do you get that opportunity to actually, I guess, whether it's implement or just use technology in the actual firm? Is it quite autonomous, or is it? Being in a general counsel role, maybe you've got a bit more leeway there than the internal systems. How does it work?
Well, I think that for me, there was never a better time for me in technology than when I was on my own, because I could do whatever I wanted. I could get whatever hardware I wanted. I could try whatever software I wanted. I knew all kinds of people in the legal tech industry, and they would give me stuff to try. It was great. So now I'm in a place where the technology is very solid. We have some great apps and systems, but they're enterprise systems because we fit into a bigger corporate system. And so sometimes that's good. Sometimes you're in necessary technologies and you wish you could do something else. Sometimes I think there's some of the stuff in the world of apps that we've gotten used to that in a corporate setting you can't really do, and you can't try as much new stuff right away. So there's some ups and downs, obviously, but they're understandable. But it's nice to I'm on this new Surface Pro, and that's a nice thing to get.
Okay, it's working well
to start my year. So,
okay, Merry Christmas.
Can't complain about that.
Well, good stuff. well, you've landed, I guess, at the intersection of legal and technology. You're actually one of the first lawyers. Again, we don't want to date you too much today, Dennis, but 1995 you had a website which not many lawyers did. And I think I've seen a statistic, again, not sure how accurate it is, but from the ABA, that only, less than, I think maybe 10% of lawyers have a website. So maybe not much has changed, but where did your actual penchant for technology come from? Where you tell us about the legal inspiration. But was there always this backdrop of technology around you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I mean, I grew up in a very small town in Indiana, 5,000 people. So I'm not going to pretend like there were all these technology companies around because there weren't. And I remember when I was in high school, and this will totally date me, but it shows the nature of the change. But our physics teacher brought in like the first calculator that could do square roots,
Wow,
and he paid $600 for it.
wow.
And that was the function. And then when we graduated from high school, and we're going to college, like three or four of my friends, we all decided we needed to like take our graduation present money and buy these calculators, which were either TI or HP, and they had like 20 times as many functions as our physics teacher had, and they cost $200, and we just thought it was amazing. Well,
Wow.
now those calculators people would just give away, right?
No, it's like it's a free app on your phone. It's so amazing because I think it was only this week I read an article by Jerry Kaplan, and he was talking about AI and where they're going to destroy the world, and it was kind of this one in one out kind of thing where basically there was needle threaders a long time ago, still making fabric, but it took a long time, and then now they're still making fabric, but they're doing it in a different way. And then the calculator thing was the same. You had this kind of enormous cost to have this, imagine the first calculator that was built, right?
Right.
The engineering feat, the science behind it, and then the cost. And then now it's a free app on your phone that you might use once a year. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
really,
So
the world's changing.
Yeah, so I did that and then, dabbled in computers and had the basic programming class in college and, got a computer as soon as I could, personal computer as soon as I could. I won't say what it is because it's one that in retrospect is an embarrassing one, but it was
Okay.
great, at the time. And I also got a Mac early on and paid $1,000 for a 30 meg hard drive, 30 megabyte hard drive.
Wow, crazy. Yeah.
And but it was really the internet that got me. So that notion that you could communicate and you'd have the whole world available to you. And so I tell the story. Probably some of my friends would tell you I tell this too many times, but for some reason in August of '95, I got an invitation to the Windows 95 rollout event, and it was going to be held at a theater, like the Microsoft St. Louis office was holding it as a theater. And I said, well, I got invited. I need a day off. I'll take a day off. I'm interested in this. And I went to that, and there's a point I'm sure there's probably some video, but there's a point where Bill Gates is talking about what Windows can do with the internet. And it's some of the stuff that we're really starting to see now, but the things that I would
Wow,
now
that's pretty
call
exciting.
financial inclusion and education and stuff like that. And it was all sort of pipe dream. And I remember I was driving home, and I had been on the internet, with the Netscape browser and stuff like, or I guess it was Netscape at the time, and I missed my exit because I was just thinking about what I had seen, and I got home and I said, and I had done all this reading before about the internet and had been on it, and I was like, oh my God, the internet has happened. It's the most important thing in my life. It's like the printing press, and I missed the whole thing. I have absolutely missed the whole internet. And so that weekend, I put together my first web page
Oh, wow.
and put it up. And then I think sort of as best we can tell, there's sort of like a class of 95, which is the first lawyers with websites. And I'm not saying we all know each other, but we know pretty much each other. And I don't think there's more than maybe like 20 or so
That's
people,
amazing.
you
Right.
know.
Maybe
And
that is the statistic that the ABA is talking about. It's those guys from 1995. The
so
class of
so once
95.
once once I did that, then I was like, and I just kept saying, and then I started writing about technology, and speaking about technology and the internet especially, and everything kind of flowed from that. And I reached this point where I was writing a column for Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly, and I started out. I had a section on the internet, and sort of 10 things you need to know about lawyers need to know about technology. And I was just writing as a placeholder, like the internet is the most important technology development of our lifetime. And I said, well, that's a placeholder. Then I go, but I really believe that. I really truly believe that. And then I said, I think what I need to do with my career, if I can, is to move closer in alignment to what my interest is in the internet and technology, the speaking, the education, the writing I do about it, and get my legal work more closely aligned with that.
Wow.
So I was doing estate planning and tax work, which I really loved. Great firm, love the people I work with, and I just said I just need to do something else, and it needs to be, became information technology law is what I would call it. And
so it's quite a conscious decision to gravitate towards
yeah,
technology in both your practice and the area.
Yeah, because I sometimes tell people when I talk about mentoring, and this surprises people, when I decided to make that change, I went to a career counselor and we just looked at everything, did this over many months, looked into all my interests, kind of scaled things, decided what it was that I wanted to do, what I didn't want to do. And I'm not saying that the result is any different than, didn't surprise me where it came out, but that exercise and that process was really important to me, and it's something that I've recommended to lots of other people who say I'm really interested in this stuff in something else, but I don't know how to do it.
That's why
I go like,
well, the cliches are quite, I guess they're almost too obvious, right? And you hear them too often that you become quite immune, but quite often people aren't picking their path, whether it's, again, follow your passion or do what you love and you'll never work another day. But you hear these things so often that they become, they numb you. And then when you actually have those decisions in front of you, it's not really, doesn't highlight the importance of it. But as you mentioned, just the simple, you had the ambition to actually go and sit with someone and talk about it. That was like a real big step in the right direction. But to actually plan it out like that, some people don't just push the pause button, right? It's like from one job to the next job, and then like 30, 40 years later, like, how did I end up here? So it's actually quite impressive that you did that, and it'd be great that you could impart that onto more people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things I tell people, it may seem like a lot of money, but if it's done well, then you just say, oh my God, I wish I would have done this when I was young. I would have, but because I sometimes say part of my career feels like it's Dennis becoming less clueless, like, because you go like, wow, why did you make this decision? You go like, because I was totally clueless,
Clueless,
like,
right.
now hopefully I'm getting a little better.
Yeah, it was a bit like, I think I asked Sam Glover why he became a lawyer, and he just said it seemed really hard, so I tried that. I quizzed him if it was for the girls, but he said definitely didn't work. So. But these days you co-host the Kennedy Mile Report again with Tom Mile on the Legal Talk Network. Great bunch of guys there, Adam Cameras and the crew. So you're discussing emerging legal technology, how it can improve your practice. In your eyes, you've covered a lot of tech. As you mentioned, you had that moment yourself where you kind of went to see Bill Gates talk about the future of technology, and you had this catalyst that kind of shaped your life. Is there that moment in terms of the technology that you've come across in legal? Was there one big one that was maybe the most exciting technological development to date?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of things, and one we talked about before we started recording, but I got close to the Bob Wiss and Greg Creel, who created a program called CaseMap. And I never did litigation, never wanted to, but I used to joke that the only reason I would become a litigator was to use CaseMap, and because I really understood what it was they were doing, because it helped you tell a story, to organize information, to map out your case. And they thought in terms, they were jury consultants before they did this. And so they thought in terms of cast of characters, what's a strong argument, what's a weak argument? Can you go through and with simple tagging kind of assess your case? And it not only helped you try a case, but for me, I thought it helped you analyze a case and decide, hey, this could be settled. You could settle this. You had a strong argument here, you had a weak argument there. This witness was good on these issues. And it was this sort of thing where Bob used to say it was like Excel for lawyers, or it was going to replace the legal pad. But I just thought it was this fantastic analytical tool for that really made me think in new ways about practicing law and how you could apply some of the same principles to the type of legal work that I did. So I thought that was important. And then I also think lately, I don't know what for me, it's the whole cloud notion is to say, hey, I can do all this stuff. I can subscribe to a program. I can get this stuff. I can download apps. I can do all this stuff. A lot of the storage and the power or processing power can reside in the cloud, and I can do all these things now that I could never do before, and it's so easy. So I think those are the things, and then I keep thinking that the combination of a tablet PC and OneNote is going to be like an amazing app for lawyers. I've been predicting that like for what feels like 100 years.
Yeah, right.
And and that hasn't happened, but I think that's the same sort of notion to say, okay, how can we find one place that we can put things into and really start to work with them in a lot of different ways, both for storage and for analysis and to find things and all of that. So I think we're more able to do that. So those are probably the main things, but with the podcast, Tom and I are always interested in if we want to go out closer to the edge of what's new that's happening is where we like to be. And then more so internet software, those sorts of things, those kinds of tools rather than gadgets and that sort of thing. Because sometimes people say to me, like, I'm surprised. I thought you'd be more of a gadget person than you are. And I go, well, I have a few things and I use them, but gadget for gadget's sake is not really my thing. But new software, that I'm interested in.
Well, you mentioned that you'd like to know what job you're hiring, I guess, that bit of software to do. And sometimes, again, like you said, gadgets for the sake of gadgets doesn't kind of quite fulfill that. Talking about the edge of technology, you've also spoken a lot about AI. It's a hot topic at the moment, and there's a lot associated to it. Whether it's taking jobs, whether it's an uprising kind of evil army that's going to swallow the human race. But you've mentioned in the past that AI might more accurately stand for assistive intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. Are we at that inflection point right now? We mentioned earlier that 30 years ago you were kind of looking at what this technology could do, and has much changed? Is it actually here now? Is it anything different?
It always seems like there's sort of a running gag about artificial intelligence that's always like 3 to 5 years away. Yeah, right. So it always
is.
And partially it's because we're so unfair to AI, right? So we would say like, well, if AI can win a chess game, against a human, then we have artificial intelligence. And they go like, oh wait, we meant like a really good chess player. Oh wait, we meant a chess master. Oh wait, we meant like a whole set of chess masters. No, actually it's not chess. It's Go. Oh wait, no, it's something else. So we're always moving the goalposts on AI. But yeah, so what became really interesting to me is Kevin Kelly in his new book called The Inevitable, which I always recommend to people, talks about some things. Technologies are what he calls inevitable. So he would say a smartphone, the idea of a smartphone was inevitable. It was going to happen given what we had and the ability to communicate mobily and to have a computer or computer chip in a phone. So the idea of a smartphone is really inevitable. That was going to happen. But the iPhone itself is not inevitable. It's a variation so we have choice about what it is that we actually do, even within these inevitable things. So when he was talking about artificial intelligence, he has this notion that artificial intelligence either becomes a service or it becomes built into everything. So he said, when we first started having electricity, you might have to have batteries or, this real sophisticated, you're at your own place, you would have to figure out how to generate electricity. Then you're on a grid and you just take it for granted. And his notion is AI could become like part of a grid where you say, oh, I need a little AI to, help me with navigation or whatever it is that you do, and you're just able to grab it as a service. Then he also talked about the notion of artificial intelligences, and then also he said something of artificial smartness, which I think is interesting because some of the AIs are really they do certain things really well, and you just want to. So I think over time you want to grab the right tool, and we did talk about the job to be done notion, but so you say I'm hiring, what am I hiring this technology for? And if you say here's what I need to do and you grab the right tool, then it's this fantastic match.
Yeah.
And then we're also seeing it's the combination. So like in the chess world, the best chess players are not the humans and they're not the AIs, it's the humans working with the AIs. And I think they're even using like a term like centaur, like the combination horse and man and
Oh,
Greek
right. So
myth.
is that the meshing of the two?
Yeah,
The actual term for it now?
so the two are working together, and that becomes interesting, and that gets to, for me, when I think of legal tech and lawyers, I could see that there are some things that AI could take over tasks of lawyers, but typically I think those are things that we want to slough off in some ways, and do the stuff that's creative, and leave the stuff that machines are best at for the machines. And so that's how I tend to think about it. And then you also kind of think in terms of probabilities and just the math of things. So in that computer in the law seminar, we posed the question of if you had done something where you were on trial and you knew that with an AI system there was like a 98% chance of that AI system getting the right answer. Okay, to the extent we
Yeah.
understand the right answer, which means that you got off because you didn't do it. And or you could have a human jury, and there was like a 90% chance that they would get that right, which I don't know, today seems a little bit generous,
Yeah.
but but and so there were like probably 20 people in the class, and uh, there was a show of hands, and there were two of us who said we would go with the AI and the percentages, and everybody else says I need the human element, and so I think that we see some things out there now, and I think this is big data, this is machine learning and stuff, where we there are these patterns that can be recognized and tell us a lot of things that we can't understand, but they work.
So
And
is that the two
and so that
outcomes?
area is really interesting to me.
So is that fair to say the two outcomes from that are a lawyer can actually deliver greater value through employing this technology, and that they are becoming this horse-shaped, mythical creature. But basically, they're meshing AI and just technology in general to become that augmented lawyer, to become assistive with in their intelligence they're gaining to actually better serve clients. So that's what lawyers should be doing right now, is saying, okay, so what technology can I use to better help serve my clients, to save me time, to actually spend more time on value delivery, and then also, what kind of, what kind of life do I want to live? Like, do I want to do repetitive tasks, or what's the case?
Right. Do I want to do the cool work, the creative work? Because I often say, to me, the law is a very creative profession. And if you can get rid of the stuff that's repetitive and not interesting, you can really do some very creative things. And I was a tax lawyer for a while, and I think that's helped me throughout my whole career. Somebody asked me, like, well, what do
They're
you
the
think
most
helps
creative
you?
ones, right?
Well, it's sort of like people said, what helps you with working with these new technologies? I said, actually being a tax lawyer, because um, we had these things, and you had very specific rules, and there were ways you could get from point A to point B, and there are many of them, and there were like conservative ways, and there are more radical ways. And
Yep.
you could, I was at a firm where we had a reputation as being incredibly creative, but very conservative at the same time. And I really liked that. So with us, we came up with things, and it's not like you were taking really big chances on that. And so, that's some of the things I like. And as you were talking, I was reminded of a conversation I had last week with a friend of mine who's has a medium-sized firm that he runs, and he's talking about all the data they have. Like if we have all this data from billing, their time records, all this sort of stuff, and he says, "I wish we have data. We don't know what to do with it." And I said, "This is to me what's kind of interesting. What if you had?" Maybe you worked with a university and you said, what if we ran some simple machine learning tools over this and just see what it pulled out?
Exactly.
Like, could there be some insights? You don't need that many that where you'd say, this is really helpful. And then he said, I think that one of the things we would find is that in March, our number of trademark registration goes up. And we might be able to validate that. And he said, I think the reason is that people at the start of the year say, I'm starting a new company this year.
Right.
This is
So they
my
start
New Year's
marketing
resolution.
towards that, right? They can probably say, hey, we
right.
should spend
And they
some
say,
Facebook ads on marketing to trademarks.
yeah, we should get our trademark now. And so then they show up in March. And then he said, then we can staff to that, and maybe we can do our marketing to that to pull more people in. And I said, I think there are tools out there. And it could be it's very simple analytics that could tell you some things, and you have data. Yeah, you have data.
That's also when you mentioned the cloud being such a shift in innovation. That's what's exciting because you're capturing all this data, whereas before it was sitting on a server somewhere. Where companies like Clio released a report, basically from a treasure trove of data from all these small to medium law firms that you would never have access to. So that then able to actually have this somewhat unstructured data, sit down and just learn about behavior and how to improve the product, what lawyers are doing, and it's really, we're moving into this age where a lot of the questions about are lawyers going to be around still, you're entering this age of really complex data management, and whether it's unstructured or using AI, it's a new realm where you're just going to need more capable computers, more software to actually pass over this stuff, and actually, similar to case map you mentioned, to actually bring out this information and then be able to use it. So it's quite interesting where that's all going.
Yeah, and I think that there are some people have done some things where they're just taking the court information and analyzing that data and saying, like, in these courts, in these cases, you're more likely to see these kinds of results.
Which judge,
obviously,
all that kind of stuff,
you got to dive into some of the things, but it can tell you some things to say if I'm on, and this is where I think the value of the lawyer would come in to say, in this district with this case, based on my experience and the data we have, this is one we should settle, or this is one we should try. And as a client, that's kind of what I want the lawyer to tell me. I don't want to know, like, oh, how do you research it, and all that sort of thing. I want to know, like, is this one I go forward with, or like what's the best way to handle this situation?
That's why in the past probably the lawyers have been guilty of charging for the in-between too much, and this can get them from point A to B probably quicker, and that's what the client wants to actually pay for. So